Welcome to Trucking Tributes. I'm your host for Trucking Tributes, Susan Patten, and today on Trucking Tributes on Wreaths Across America Radio, and thanking again the folks at Radio Nemo as well for having us on this Trucking Tuesday. I'm speaking with Norita Taylor, and Norita Taylor represents the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, or for short, OOIDA. Norita, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Hey, always appreciative of Wreaths Across America and a chance to talk about what we do here at OOIDA on behalf of our members.
And there may be plenty of folks tuned in today to Trucking Tributes who are familiar, but I always work from the premise that there are a whole lot of people tuning in today who are not familiar with OOIDA. So let's start the show and then unpack all that for us, Narita, and tell us how it is and how you operate and who you're serving.
Sure. So basically, OOIDA, Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, we are a trade association that was started back in the early 70s, 1973 to be exact. And the history there is that it had a connection with the oil embargoes and some of the challenges that everyone was dealing with fuel prices and fuel shortages. But those were particularly hard on independent truckers. And that caused a lot of problems for them. And there were some strikes and there were some protests and some visits to Washington to DC. And at the end of it all, the association has stayed together and grown throughout the years and gone on to represent lots of different issues that challenge small business truckers. Most of our members are individuals that own and drive their own long haul truck. Sometimes they have, a few trucks, a small fleet, but mostly they're out there on their own. And they face a lot of challenges. And we try to offer as many services as we can, in addition to advocacy, which means that we take their concerns to Washington, D.C., try to streamline that process. But at the end of the day, they are the voices that need to be heard. We always encourage them to continue speaking on their own with their representatives in Washington, D.C. So that's the long and the short of who we are.
By golly, Norita, if you have figured out how to streamline the Washington, D.C. process, then you need to have numerous awards, I think. But when you
Well,
talk about advocacy and that process, what does it look like? Give us an idea of what some of those issues are for our independent operators.
sure. So it can be anything on the regulatory side or on the legislative side. And sometimes there's a little bit of crossover because what happens is that within the Department of Transportation, there's an agency called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA. And a lot of what they do, they oversee safety of motor carriers, but some of what they do as far as the regulations that get put in place are at the behest of Congress. And so that means there's also a legislative side, which also means that, like I said earlier, we encourage all our members to not only talk to us, but to talk to their own representatives in Washington, D.C. So to answer your question about issues, on the regulatory side, a big one would be hours of service. And that one goes back quite a ways and it has had a lot of changes throughout the years, revisions and things like that. But basically, hours of service are the regulations that determine the hours that a truck driver works. Anyone that is holding a CDL, a Class A CDL, is required to comply with those hours of service, which in short means that they can drive and work a certain amount of time and then they have to stop and rest. And so that may sound simple, but it's actually got a lot to it. And we listen to our members and how they are complying with those regulations, the challenges they face, and we try to represent them in anything that's proposed to change them and how they would feel about that, different provisions within those regulations. So that's one example on the regulatory side.
And I can only imagine that, as of weather being one of those things that would impact hours of service and their time behind the wheel. Can you give us an example of other things that actually impact a driver's hours of service?
Sure, and as a matter of fact, weather is a big one. So, kind of playing off of that, in general, truck drivers cannot predict their schedules the way the rest of us can. They cannot plan. They can plan to a certain degree, but they can't plan everything. They are driving all over the country, and the weather might change from one place to another and have a tremendous effect on their ability to keep moving. And might affect, which also might affect their ability to park. There's also a shortage of parking for trucks, but traffic is another big one that would affect hours of service. If there's congestion, if there's an incident that causes a backup, that can create a delay. And to the rest of us, who are just commuting to work, that amount of time might not seem like a lot, but when truck drivers are, hauling goods and complying with hours of service, all of that time goes against their clock. It doesn't matter if it's traffic or weather, or if they're being a big one is being held up at a shipper or receiver. If they're waiting for someone else to load or unload them, that clock is still ticking. They don't get to just hit the pause button. If they run into the 11 hours of driving or the 14 hours of their workday, they have to stop. They have to stop and rest for 10 hours. So, traffic, weather, shippers and receivers that don't respect their time. All of these things come into play that can have a tremendous effect on how their day goes.
Yeah, and by golly, we've run into it at Wreaths Across America, how those changes as much as the professional drivers have. Certainly when it relates to our annual wreath escort to Arlington National Cemetery that we, of course, are known for, throughout the country, that we have to make sure that our law enforcement personnel and those who are coordinating that convoy understand about those hours of service. And we need to be in a decent place at a decent time in order to make sure that we can accommodate our drivers who are on our annual wreath escort. And it also impacts us in terms of logistics when it comes to them getting loaded with their veterans wreaths and the time that it takes them to, get to checked in at the driver's check-in in Columbia Falls, Maine, and or preparing for those key exchanges throughout the country or hitting the cross docks throughout the country that we have and operate. So as much as it impacts the professional drivers and the industry itself, it also impacts our logistics as an organization and how we coordinate and plan. And our hats off to OOIDA for making sure that you are helping these folks. I mean, you talk about the advocacy piece of it and saying, it's really important that you tell your membership to also engage with legislators and their senators and so forth. But that's not easy. They're out on the road doing their job. So praise be to OOIDA for taking on that role and responsibility for them. Norita, I'm curious as how you got involved with this organization and what is your capacity within the organization specifically?
Sure. So I've been in the Kansas City area all my life. Our headquarters for OOIDA is in Grain Valley, Missouri, which is in the Kansas City metropolitan area. We are literally right next to I-70 at the Grain Valley exit. I can see the interstate from my window here. And I have a background in public relations and communications. And about 18 years ago, I was looking for an opportunity, a change, something closer to my proximity of where I live. And it just so happens that OOIDA was not very far and was looking for someone like me. And interestingly enough, I also shared my interest with my father, not realizing he would know exactly who OOIDA is. At the time, I had never heard of OOIDA, but my father, who's my grandfather had been a truck driver. He was an auto hauler back in the 1950s, and my dad always admired him for his career. and had an admiration for trucking and truck drivers themselves. He was not a truck driver himself, but he had an appreciation for truck drivers and what they do. And he was very excited to learn that I was applying to work here. And he thought it was just a great idea. And I thought, well, you know what? If I've got my dad behind me, I must be making a good decision. And so 18 years later, I'm still here, and we've grown to add another me. I'm doing air quotes. Another me in our DC office. We do have a DC office where our government affairs is located, and we have someone like me, a counterpart like me, working there, and we work together as a team, doing media relations and other communications for the association.
That is exceptional. And I always love to ask folks on Trucking Tributes, Norita, what is it about the trucking industry that you enjoy so much? I mean, 18 years is a long tenure at a company and an organization, and obviously it's a right match for you, for your communication skills and so forth. But what is it about the trucking industry that you enjoy so much?
Well, I think it's because there's so much to learn uh, on a daily basis. There will be things that will come up that I'll be like, wait, I've never heard of that. How is it I've never heard of that? There's always something going on. There's always something new. There's always something changing, even though at the same time, a lot of things don't change. We're always challenged with, like I said, the hours of service. There's always, regulations and things that we're always challenged with that we seem to talk about year after year. But at the same time, there's new things going on. There's new things to learn. There's new things that pop up. You've got all kinds of new challenges that our members will be facing. And it's just interesting to interact with the media about it and try to educate them. I think maybe that's probably the most profound thing, is helping educate other people about what this industry is really about.
And we know at Wreaths Across America that it is an invaluable industry to obviously our mission to remember, honor, and teach, but to the nation as a whole. And I think the nation as a whole probably got a really good glimpse of that during the COVID years, where they realized, in fact, how critical the trucking profession and the transportation industry was and is to our country. And just, we always on Trucking Tributes give our hats off to the carrier companies and our professional drivers because they're just the best of the best, in our opinion. I'm Susan Patten, your host for Trucking Tributes. We want to thank the folks at Radio Nemo for having us on this morning as well. Now, Norita, that's what we're talking about, of course, today on Trucking Tributes is your involvement with Wreaths Across America. And I know for a fact that many of your members are members of our honor fleet at Wreaths Across America, which really is a tremendous statement in and of itself, I think, because to have independent owner operators be able to afford that donation, both affording in, monetary standard, but in time as well, is really quite exceptional. And how is it that you all first really got word of Wreaths Across America and what we were all about?
Oh, I don't know that I can pinpoint the exact first time, because I think that, Wreaths Across America goes back quite so far and is so diverse. But I think maybe a simple way to put it is that we just hear about it from our members. Our members say, hey, I'm doing this, or I'm interested in this. Did you know about this? What can you do to support me and what I'm doing? And I think the simple answer is we've just heard about it from our members first, probably.
We are talking, in fact, about that $5 back sponsorship program that any organization out there participating can do this as well. So explain how it is that you make it work for your group.
Sure. So basically, we have a Truckers for Troops care package program that we started about back in 2008. I think it was 2007 or 2008. And we knew that our members wanted to support military serving overseas. You might remember we had quite a presence in the Middle East at that time. And so there was a lot of interest in showing support. And we also knew that there was probably an opportunity to send care packages. So we just simply asked our members if they were interested in helping to do that. And they answered yes. And so we've continued the Truckers for Troops program. Even though there's a reduced presence overseas, we found ways to channel that support to veterans. So we do some veterans care packages as well. But what we were able to do with Wreaths Across America is to make the connection with the support for troops and simply add that to our website where the Truckers for Troops presence is located and encourage visitors to also support Wreaths Across America, since we know that that is a very obvious connection for people to make. If they're supporting military and veterans, they would also support honoring those that have died and are, in those cemeteries, and having those wreaths placed there. And like you said, some of our own members have actively hauled some of those. So it seemed like a really obvious connection partnership to make. And we were simply happy to add that feature to our website and encourage participants to make those donations so that it helps both organizations at the same time.
I love that you pointed that out. I always hesitate to use the cliche phrase, it's a win-win, but what else do you say? It's a win-win. It's a win-win for both organizations. And what we're talking about on Trucking Tributes is the sponsorship program that we have at Wreaths Across America. And through this program, this organization, being Wreaths Across America, has actually been able to give back to other organizations. And since the inception of Wreaths Across America as a nonprofit organization, the $5 back sponsorship program works that way, so that you sign up as a sponsorship group, just as OOIDA has done for us, and then you solicit the sponsorship of these veterans wreaths. The veterans wreaths, of course, are $17 per wreath. And then what happens is Wreaths Across America will give you $5 back, hence the $5 back program, to the organization. And you are able to use that money, no holes barred, no strings attached, for your organization's effort. And in OOIDA's case, as you heard, that is for the Truckers for Troops program. Now, you mentioned that there's been a decreased presence, yet we have troops deployed all over the world still. And unfortunately, probably as we speak, things have amped up a little bit again throughout the world, with some tensions, of course, in the Middle East and various other locations. So how do you actually coordinate the Truckers for Troops program?
Sure. So basically, we hold a couple of campaigns per year where we discount our membership price, and we dedicate 10% of those membership registrations and renewals to Truckers for Troops, and we also match it from OOIDA. And those funds are put together to do packages for veterans' homes and care packages. And I will tell your listeners that, if they know someone serving in a combat zone, send us an email. We're always looking for more addresses to send care packages. You just send an email to troops@ooida.com, and we'll take care of sending a care package. And our care packages, they're not just a little shoebox with a few pairs of socks and some snacks. Ours are full of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of goodies and things that we kind of customize it every year, but we put a lot in there.
Wow. And for those listening, we will give out that email address again before the end of this Trucking Tributes episode. So please be sure to get your pens or pencils handy, and you'll be able, or your phone, and take notes on your phone, depending upon how adept you are with your technology. And we will give that email address out again, of course, and then we'll put that in the Trucking Tributes blog post as well, Norita, because I think that's just marvelous. I always been a fan of the care packages because, let's face it, they are away from home. in many instances, they are in harm's way. And what a great morale booster to get things from home, from people who care. I mean, I think it just sends such a strong message that number one, you are not forgotten out there in your service. We know you're out there on a daily basis. We're not taking that for granted. And we know that sometimes those care packages, those comfort packages from home really can boost the spirits and let everybody know that, hey, we're thinking about you and we want to support you in what it is that you're doing in your military service. So that really is exceptional. Talk a little bit more, Norita, if you wouldn't mind. And I am speaking with Norita Taylor. She is with the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association, or for short, OOIDA or OOIDA. And you've got members as part of your organization, correct me if I'm wrong, Norita, that are not necessarily independent operator truckers. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. We also have members who are company drivers and who are owner operators that are leased to carriers, which, some people think of that as independent. If we want to get really nitty gritty, a truly independent person has their own authority, but we don't need to split hairs here. But yes, we do have company drivers that are members because throughout a truck driver's career, they may switch back and forth. They may start out as a company driver, then get their own truck, and then maybe, later in their career, they may decide to pull back on living on the road and just work locally and go back to being a company driver.
Truth to that, I've heard it told on Trucking Tributes, as many interviews as I have done with professional drivers, that that indeed does happen, and more frequently than you would think within the industry. And it's really just kudos to those folks who are able to go out and do their own thing. And then let's face it, after a while, they get a little tired of it and say, hey, I'd rather go back to being a company driver because, being an independent operator, there's an awful lot to it, and that sort of thing. So, Norita, what are we not addressing about your organization and how it serves the trucking industry that you think is important?
Well, I just think it's important for people to know that, we're here to represent them and to talk about the issues that are important to them. And that with any given issue that we do talk about, that, safety is always the first thing for everyone, for all that share the highways, for our members. Safety is always the biggest message going forward. I mentioned hours of service. Everybody needs to be safe. Everybody needs to be rested when they drive. The nuances become, like with any regulation, whether it works for out in the real world, flexibility, those kinds of things. And I just think that people need to know that we are here to talk to them. We want to hear from them. We want to help them reach out to their representatives. We actually do make it a little easier with our Fighting for Truckers website, which does give you a way to contact your lawmakers directly. It's just a click and find. You don't have to try to backtrack and remember who was your elected representative last time. If you punch in your address and it pulls it up for you, and we have some templates that you can use, that you could customize your own message on a particular issue and reach out directly to those that represent you in Washington, D.C.
And let's face it, if they are in fact worth their weight in public service to the community, they are listening to their constituents. And it's, more numbers the merrier in terms of getting that message across to those
That's right.
who are spending time.
It doesn't do any good for me to say I have 150,000 members in our association if the lawmakers don't hear from you. They need to
Directly.
hear from you.
Yeah, they need to know that there truly is impact in the decisions that they're making and the bills that they're presenting and those sort of thing. And let's face it, they react if they're hearing from people. And that's the way it's designed and that's the way it should be. So Norita Taylor with OOIDA, let's give out that email address for your Truckers for Troops program. So again, if anybody out there knows of someone who is serving and deserves one of these humongous packages that I'm hearing about, care packages, how do they reach out to you?
Sure. So, you can find more information by going to our website, ooida.com. And the email that I mentioned is just simply troops at OOIDA.com. So TROOPS at OOIDA.com.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but this question may do that because I didn't tell you it was coming. Do you have a sense for how many care packages you've actually done over the course of your program?
Oh, actually, we do. If you'll bear with me
It
here.
kind of gives, yeah, while you're searching, it gives me absolute goosebumps. It really does, as I've mentioned before.
Sure,
That's
sure.
absolutely
So
great.
normally I have that right in front of me. Um, let's see here. I do have that statistic, if you'll bear with me.
Oh, I'll bear with you. Absolutely. You are listening to Trucking Tributes, by the way, on Radio Nemo. And we thank the crew at Radio Nemo always for our partnership that we have that allows us to get the ears of more professional drivers and transportation companies.
Sure. So basically, we have raised over the past 17 years, we've raised more than $800,000, sent more than 3,300 care packages, serving more than 39,000 members of the military.
That is just extraordinary. And again, if you know someone who is serving who has not been the recipient of one of these care packages, please reach out to the Truckers for Troops program through OOIDA. And Norita, any final thoughts at all about your participation with Wreaths Across America that you care to share?
Hey, just be safe out there and appreciate everything you all do out there.
Couldn't agree with that message more, that message of safety that OOIDA is all about. And of course, we're all about it at Wreaths Across America too, because we want to make sure that you are coming back in one piece to join us for Wreaths Across America's mission to remember, honor, and teach. And of course, National Wreaths Across America Day is Saturday, December 13th. It is never, ever too soon to reach out to our trucking division because the rumor has it straight. Actually, it's not a rumor at all, nor is it a secret. We need trucks. We need trucks to haul these veterans wreaths. And our Director of Transportation, Courtney George, informs us that in 2025, we will be upping our numbers, probably close to 100 to 200,000 additional wreath orders this year. And that means that those veterans wreaths need to get to the headstones of our fallen throughout the country because it's not just Arlington National Cemetery. We are at over 5,000 participating locations and memorials in addition to Arlington National Cemetery. So we need your support. We hope you reach out. Norita Taylor, OOIDA, thank you so much for your involvement and your support of our mission. We appreciate your time today.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye.